Hello and welcome to Horseplayer Happy Hour. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again. No longer in Nashville, no longer at Kentucky Downs, not in Toronto, but right back here in Brooklyn for game 17 or so of the regular season of Horseplayer Happy Hour. We're getting down near the end, the second to last week of the regular season. But don't worry, even if you didn't have an opportunity to qualify for our playoffs. And honestly, even starting today, I'm pretty sure if you got to, I don't want to say top 10, maybe 2 top 5 finishes, I think you'd still be able to qualify for the postseason, as well as, of course, these games, these $20 contests or feeders into Breeders' Cup qualifying action at the weekend. And we've had a number of players punch their tickets directly from here to the BCBC. But you have an opportunity, even during our playoffs, we're going to have regular $179 qualifiers. In fact, the most money we raise all year for our charity beneficiaries is actually going to be the games of October 6th through October 27th when we're running those direct qualifiers for the BCBC. So, and you should be able to feed into those as well. I should actually get going on that and make sure they're ready to have those games up. So lots of ways to get to the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge contest that my co-host on this program has had a top 10 finish in, and I know is the center in many ways of his horse playing year. He is from an undisclosed location in New England and his own eponymous podcast, TV's Matt Bernier. Matt, how are things?
Pete, it's good. Good to be back home for a couple weekends where you can take a bit of a breath, and I'm sure you feel the same way, but I know you go right back over, next week? You go to England?
A little bit longer than that. I think I have 1 week to take a breath. I'm flying out on October 8th. So I will be doing that. The 10:13 show, though, I will be doing live from somewhere in London, presumably some pub.
Yeah, and that first, so you fly out 10:08. I'll be doing our 10:06 show from a hotel in Connecticut somewhere, as I'm off to do more Keeneland work. But yeah, no, it's good to be home for a couple days. Unfortunately, the weather, I'm sure it's the same way down where you are. Anywhere in sort of the mid-Atlantic up into New England, it's just like coming down in sheets. It has not let up at one point all day today. I think it really started about 4:30, 5 o'clock this morning. So it's been a total washout here. At least Aqueduct, it looks like the sun might be out a little bit.
Yeah, the sun did come through here, but we had showers and we are off the turf today. I was actually a little concerned about the numbers for our game, but I think people understand that we're getting down to the nitty gritty and they're trying to qualify for the playoffs. They're trying to support this good cause. They're trying to get their way into the Saturday qualifier because we had 156 people turn up, which means the top 15 players playing today will win their $179 entries into Saturday. And then we've got a couple of breakage credits as well. We saw the leaderboard up there for a second. Craig had popped it up. We're now looking at the leaderboard for today's contest. But just quickly, before we get into that, I will point out, there it is, Johnny on the spot, Craig with the quick change. Greg Kingma, he has a commanding lead. I mean, the others have work to do. You can still get, however, in theory, 200 points if you win this week and you win next week, or try to go close to that and try to run Greg Kingma down. This is for the tour throughout the regular season. The person who finishes atop this leaderboard right now, that person is Greg Kingma, who I've had the pleasure of running into at Saratoga Racecourse and a Breeders' Cup as well. He'll be winning a BCBC seat just for that. And then, of course, we got the second one that'll be available in an 80-person tournament to anyone who has finished in the top 2 all year long. You get an automatic entry, and then beyond that, you qualify via highest scores on the tour. And that's where it's still really important. Even next week, if you had one good finish, get involved and see if you can't get yourself up there and get into this tournament. Let's go back to that other leaderboard, Craig, and take a quick look at what's going on as far as today's contest goes. It's early days, and it's been chalky. So we've got those 4 players with the 17-10, including Greg Kingma. He's not taking anything for granted. He's still going to look to improve that score. We use the top 8 scores, so it'd be, frankly, not that easy for Greg to improve his score at this point. But I don't know, maybe he has one low score in that total or something, and another top 5 finish. Plus, again, that seat aside, a chance to go on and play on Saturday. I know contests, one great thing that they do, they give you a cost-controlled way to get action all day long. And then in your betting, you can just focus on your strongest opinions and not, diminish. You don't have to put so much money behind your action bets as it were. But all to play for today. We did an all Belmont at Aqueduct format. So we've got these 5 races left. We're going to cover 2 of them. Obviously, race 5 and race 6 on the show. We'll give you some quick thoughts on those. But yeah, we're really getting down to crunch time here, Matt, and I'm curious to see how things develop. I mean, what's your gut? Does Grant Kigman have this thing sewn up?
I mean, it would take a pretty heroic effort here for the final couple weeks for something sort of bizarre to happen. We have seen crazy things happen in contests, but I think the format, at least that we have, sort of it's not impossible for something wild to happen, but you need all the stars to align. So I think he's probably in pretty decent shape. And to your point, I mean, even if for whatever reason he does get run down, he's going to be in good position going into the playoffs to hopefully go on a little bit of a run. And the beauty of the playoff format is it just gets whittled down 50% at a time. So you don't need to absolutely smash it out of the park in any given week. You just got to continue to make the cut to get to that final table. So again, to your point, even if you're not in a position to really threaten for anything too crazy, hop in. You've still got an opportunity to finish in the exact in one of these final weeks, get into the playoffs, and anything can happen from there.
Let's look at this race at Belmont, race number 5, the next one in this contest. You see that you guess it's an open race when you see there's 4 people tied for the lead today, and they are representing 4 different horses: the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 6 here. You know that we're dealing with at least somewhat of an open race, and none of those are even the favorite. The favoritism going here to number 5, Stonewall Star in this spot. These are 2-year-old New York bred fillies, maiden special weights, going 6 furlongs on the dirt. And yeah, we'll see. We had luck. We had a nice fat exacta we were able to give out last week, Matt. Maybe we can come up with something good in here. Does anything leap off the page at you?
No, these are always very tough races. Horses that are very inexperienced. You got a number of first-time starters, a couple of horses that have gone out one time and may or may not have done anything in the afternoon. I'm still going to lean into the connections in situations like this, and maybe it's a negative that Disruption stopped as badly as she did after chasing the pace in her debut up at Saratoga. But the pedigree, I know it says good harrowed, so we're not talking about a sloppy track, but Practical Joke, he's about 16% with his progeny on off going. This one is a half sibling to a runner who was 2 for 2 on a wet track. So there's at least a little bit of pedigree there that would suggest any moisture will only be to this one's benefit. Certainly won't be to the detriment. The key to the detriment piece could be, is the horse any good? I have no idea if she can really pick her feet up, but 5-1 on Chad in a Rad Ortiz at Aqueduct. I'm willing to gamble on that in a spot like this. I
get it. I think Disruption will be closer to the pace than before. I've got a bit of a stab in here. This is an interesting contest horse potentially, and it definitely requires some imagination. But number 8, Sweet Liberty, I thought was a little bit interesting. Stayed around in the latter part of that race the last day at Saratoga. Now, there was a little bit of a setup, and it was a day when you seemed to be able to close. But you do have a horse that got within 2 lengths of Stonewall Star. We see how they're betting Stonewall Star. I just reflexively want to reach for a horse when they were within 2 lengths, and they're these young horses, and you're getting 7 times the price on one. I mean, not the likeliest of winners here, but I was willing to take a little bit of a shot with Sweet Liberty, at least to get somewhere up in the number. Can you see it if you squint?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, based on the horses that have run, she is among the fastest already. That was her first start off of a little bit of a freshening. And more importantly, this will be her second start with blinkers. And I don't think that's an angle that gets discussed enough. Many, many moons ago, I saw Mike Samich tweet about the idea that second-time blinkers can be almost as effective, if not more so, than first-time blinkers. Because now, he didn't really get into the rationale, but I mean, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together. The idea that, all right, well, first time out, maybe they were a little bit, just trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Now, okay, right. So I've really kind of taken that to heart, and when I see that, I look at it a little bit more and give them a second glance if I would have just passed him over. So look, especially at the price that you're getting, I think that's a massive number for a horse that, on paper, she is among the favorites just based on speed figures.
That's an angle. I know Frank Scattoni, who writes for the Del Mar website, the Santa Anita website, appears on our airwaves from time to time. He's a big believer in that one as well. The other horse I thought was a little interesting, maybe was the firster on the outside, Caribbean Breeze, this Mendelssohn filly for Brad Cox. Not exactly taking a crushing amount of money, but not unfancied or friendless either in the marketplace. And in a race where I'm having a little bit of trouble separating ones who've run, but she could be an interesting stranger if she can break and not take a right turn for Jose Ortiz in this spot. Another one I'd be messing around with and, maybe doubles into the next race. So, yeah, I want to see if we can get anything done with the 8 and the 9. Matt with the 4, Disruption as a pop from the gate at Belmont at the Big A. We've got the favorite, Stonewall Star up there, dueling-ish with 3 unions, with the one of the happier sounds there is in the background from Matt. The big long shot, Splendid One stalking. In behind that, Disruption, getting what can hopefully end up being a nice pocket trip. And then I'm right outside, pinning you in at the moment with my 8, Sweet Liberty. What do you think of Disruption spot in here? Are you happy enough with that?
I think you and I are both in decent spots. The only concern is that this horse on the front seems to be moving pretty well. Irad's starting to warm up though with Chad's filly, so we'll find out if the overland route is too much.
Yeah, and the pocket trip worked out, but I'm afraid we're looking at Manny with a double handful on this Stonewall Star. This one might be all over, but the shouting as the 8 fell away tamely. You're making a run here. Just a question of if the bird has flown or not, and I think it has.
I think she's too far back, but
the 3 come running on here probably just for second. It looks like it's going to be a pretty straightforward 5, 4, 3 at Aqueduct, and that won't be shaking up the board too much with favorites with a favorite winning. And you get some decent place points on the 5-1 with Disruption there. We should mention these contests. They take place. Our partners over on Horseplayers.com. This is the qualifying site for Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge and also the NHC, an event we both have a lot of familiarity with. Go check out Horseplayers.com. There'll be games that are at your price point and that will help you meet your horse playing goals. And, of course, we always encourage you to get involved on these Thursdays. Again, the buy-in's going up. We got one more $20 game, and then they're going to go to the 179 format. But, I highly recommend, even at the 179 level, get involved because this is a chance for you to, essentially make a significant donation to a great cause. We run these games, and the profits go to the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, who do that critical work of accrediting aftercare organizations, and then also our founding partners over here at In the Money Media, the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. I can't say enough how impressed I am with their work, not just helping horses, but also helping humans through their Second Chances program. You can learn a lot more about them from our page, trfinc.org/players. We're going to be doing a little party with them. We're sponsoring a party on Friday night of Breeders' Cup week over at the Griffin Gate Marriott. We'd love to see people from here come. Tickets very reasonable to that, and we're timing it in a way where if you have dinner plans, it's cool. Just come from the track, have a drink with us, and then go do that. You can get all that information, trfinc.org/players. Do you have all your Breeders' Cup plans all sorted out? Do you know? Have your presumably you're going to be in house?
Yes, I still have one more trip ahead that I need to get all of my itinerary taken care of. But typically for a Breeders' Cup week, I usually get in Tuesday. Wednesday is a day just from start to finish of meetings and whatnot. You and I, what was it, last year? When did we do the Final Answers pod? Was that Wednesday night or Thursday night?
I can't even remember, but we should look and get that. We should get that on the I think it was Thursday, because I think Wednesday is usually our Wednesday's usually the live show that we do. And then Thursday, that was fun, right? We did it all with the question. We did a questions format, didn't we?
It was all Q&A. Yeah. We had folks send in, and we had more questions than we had time for. We ended up going
that was
quite
great.
Late into the evening.
We got to do that again. I hadn't thought about that, but we got to get that on the calendar again.
But yeah, so I'll get in Tuesday, more likely than not, unless something bizarre changes. A couple tweaks that were, nothing's finalized yet, but with the betting the Breeders' Cup show, apparently there are going to be some changes with that. Coming up on Thursday, and then obviously the big shows Friday, Saturday. So Breeders' Cup week, it's one of those. It's a bittersweet one for me because it's the, to me, I've said it before, it's the end all be all as far as the racing calendar is concerned, and everyone is together. But at the same time, from a work standpoint, two reasons. The last thing you want to do is go out and not be feeling good when you have to go to work the next day, but also you just don't have the energy to do so many of these things. You're so locked into what you've got to take care of from a work standpoint, and then also from a contest standpoint with the BCBC, that At the end of the day, I want to get a sandwich, go to my room, go to sleep for as many hours as possible, and then get up and do it all over again in the morning.
It is not easy, especially when, and the mornings, it can be late nights and early mornings. And I never quite know. I often feel pretty just wrecked at the end of the week, but it's the best kind of wreck because it's the culmination of the year in so many ways. And it's really the time of the year where, for me, racing features itself not only as this primo sporting event, but also it features it so well as a gambling game. And when racing comes together like that, it just gives me lots of warm feelings. And we've been fortunate to have a lot of success with horses, whether it's on this show or elsewhere on the airwaves. We've been able to help people out and cash some tickets ourselves. So hopefully it's going to be more of the same. And then, very deep breath afterwards.
Now, you and I talked about it a little bit after the big races on Saturday at Woodbine. I talked about it on my show earlier this week. And if you want to work in the video pieces, you tell me and I can pivot and we can wait to do those. But I'm curious your thoughts. I mean, I brought up the idea, the Breeders' Cup, we talk about and it will still be the best betting opportunity of the entire year. But boy, some of these divisions, all of a sudden, you've got prohibitive favorites and favorites that I don't know that I can really poke too many holes in. And, I went through and looked at Keeneland's results from the Breeders' Cup in 2015. And then again, a couple of years ago with horses that were 2-1 or less. And at Keeneland, they were extremely good, better than what the percentages and the numbers would suggest. And I understand it's a small sample size, so some people will just roll their eyes and say you're trying to draw conclusions out of nothing. But I believe the number was 6 out of 10 winners with horses that were 2-1 or less. And this is not including the juvenile races. And then 9 out of 10 in the exacta. So the two Keeneland meets anyway would suggest that the chalks typically show up. Now, conversely, you've got the two events that we've had at Del Mar, and it's been chaos. All hell's broken loose, where the favorites have been beaten, and they don't just get beaten; they finish 6th, 7th, 8th. So, I mean, I'm just curious. What's your outlook right now, knowing that we've got some divisions that look very, very top heavy?
I think it's going to play well to a player who's willing to get stuck into some of these favorites and really choose spots well. I don't think you have to just say, oh, it's not a good betting race because Flightline is in it. We have a question about if Flightline can be beaten. And, my answer to that is if it wasn't a horse race, he couldn't be beaten. But we've seen so much crazy stuff happen over the years that I am not going to, in good conscience, unless it's with, heavy irony, ever say that a horse can't be beaten. We have Jonathan for that. But I think it's still okay. I mean, the more I thought about it, thinking about the 15 Breeders' Cup, we used the example of Tommy Massis and the famous exacta in the turf and how is that what we could look for this year? But that could have just as easily, if he bets a little less on his combo, if the fellow whose name I'm going to forget again, who ran second, who had the big cold try, I don't think it was cold, but it was a tight try in the Classic, had a little more on that combination, we wouldn't even be thinking about that notion. You can still turn a very short priced horse into a major contest score, especially if you're somebody who is very comfortable in vertical pools. But I think it's going to be a year that is very beneficial for somebody who doesn't mind big tight combinations or at least narrowing down seriously in half the legs of a pick and bet, or somebody who's very comfortable in exotic pools. Funny enough, and I haven't said this to him, I think it could be a harder, and maybe not, but maybe it's a harder year for a Matt Miller, a guy who has espoused that he really does not want to play exactas. He does not want to play doubles. He wants to find a horse that he can bet to win that's going to get him there. Unless he's got 100,000 heading into the Classic, he's probably not going to be able to do that. So, it's all going to depend on one's gam, and we'll ask him about that and see. And this guy, he has planned A all the way down to Z, like any great horse player would. And it's not like he's going to be caught unaware of this, and I'm sure he'll adjust on the fly. But I do think it's interesting to think about what type of players this year is likely to suit. Now, we say all this, and who knows, maybe Modern Games doesn't win, maybe Flightline doesn't win. It's horse racing. Anything can happen. But I can tell you those horses are going to be, obviously the key to my strategy on the day, because I think they're real tent poles that you can build around.
Yeah, the horses I laid out, and again, all of my sort of data that I threw out there was not including the 2-year-old races. The heavy numbers or the heavy favorites internationally, Flightline in the Classic, Modern Games in the Mile, Jack Christopher in the Dirt Mile, Jackie's Warrior in the Sprint, and then you've got 2 horses. Well, let me backtrack. Nest is a pretty clear-cut favorite in the distaff. I acknowledge. I think that's a race that's far too deep to get stuck in to too short a number on any one horse. I love Nest, but I could see Malathot winning. I could see Clarier bouncing back. I could see She Dares the Devil or Search Results. It's just the filly out in California.
Open.
Yeah,
it's just not just Nest in there. I mean, she's one of the ones, but I don't think she should be anywhere. Is she in the betting markets anywhere near the type of favoritism that those others are? I mean, is she 2-1, 3-1-ish?
So I looked at an offshore book, and they had her listed at 6-5.
I mean, that's just nuts, isn't it?
Compared to 3-1 from Malathot, I believe. So I mean that's a pretty major discrepancy for arguably 2 horses that on numbers could be 1A, 1B, 1B, 1A, however you want to approach it. The only other race I threw out there, and I mentioned the caveat that don't take any of my advice on turf sprints because we know my track record. But you and I chatted about it. I mean, you're going to have Golden Pal and Highfield Princess, and then everyone else. Yeah. So whether or not you get a horse that's in at 8-5, I could see both of them being 2-1, 5-2, and then you've got a gap to third choice at 6-1. So those were the older horses that had races anyway with pretty clear-cut favorites, or at least 2 horses, that kind of stuck out. Beyond that, the filly and mare sprint seemed a little bit open. The turf seemed a bit open. So maybe you can shop around a little bit there. But, those horses that I rattled off, I said, boy, just based on math, the 2-1 idea would suggest that you're only going to get, 2 of those 7 are going to win. You're going to have 5 that lose, roughly thereabouts, give or take a race or 2. I said, man, I have a hard time seeing 5 of them lose. But, again, that's why they run the race. You never know.
Jackie's Warrior. I mean, that's you got to figure that's going to be a sub 2-1 price if everything goes according to plan. Maybe quite a bit sub that.
I was going to say he's probably approaching odds on, right?
I mean, on the known form, from right now. I mean, so much can happen in these last round of preps, but you would think he's going to be very short, right? Yeah,
6-5, 7-5. Yeah.
So it's there's going to be a lot of them, and obviously we're going to be following this all the way through to the big day and providing analysis and thoughts on either how to use these favorites in a way that won't get you too hurt, or help you even, or maybe some interesting alternatives along the way. Let's go to our pre-tape, because I think it's going to work out really nicely if we go to this, and then we should come back and have a couple of minutes to look at this next race at Belmont at Aqueduct. This was a fun one. Vanessa Ryle, who I've worked with for years at Sky Sports Racing, she, I first knew of her many moons ago from her work on the Final Furlong podcast. She does her own pod and video work now through attheraces.com, a colleague and a friend, and somebody who's going to be over at the Breeders' Cup, which is going to be a lot of fun. She's got thoughts on, we've got some good stuff at Newmarket the next few days, not just these 2 win in your in races, but some other races that typically yield starters for the Breeders' Cup. So hopefully we're going to have some more content all around that. But now let's kick this to Vanessa and me from earlier today to talk about the 2 win in your in races at Newmarket over the course of the next few days. Next up on the show, we welcome in one of our foreign correspondents to these airwaves to talk to us about some win and you're in action from 2-year-olds over in England this week. Hello, Vanessa Ryle. Vanessa, what's going on?
Hello. I'm very well over here. The weather isn't great, but we have some great action in Newmarket, their Cambridge meeting. I love this meeting. It's sort of the start of the real autumnal 2-year-old sort of stars coming out here in the UK and Ireland. And yeah, this weekend's got some really good action specifically for the 2-year-olds, which obviously we're going to get stuck into.
I was excited to hear that you will be making what I believe is your maiden voyage to the Breeders' Cup in just several weeks' time. Is this a meeting that's been on your radar, something that's been on your list of things to get to for a minute?
Oh yeah, for sure. This is a huge amount of excitement for me, as you are well aware. I can't wait. Yeah, it'll be my first trip to the Breeders' Cup. I've never been before. I try and travel around and go to as many race meetings in foreign countries as I can. And the Breeders' Cup, just in my old role, kind of producing and presenting at Sky Sports Racing, it was always just a manic time, and it was important that I was more at base camp. And now that I get to do my own thing a little bit more in front of the camera, I decided this was the year to break my maiden and go over to the Breeders' Cup. Keeneland, obviously, I can't wait. I really can't wait. I'm very overexcited about it.
Well, you're going to be part of a lot of the coverage we're doing on In the Money Media, and then hopefully also with the Breeders' Cup content team, and who knows, maybe even with our friends at AtTheRaces.com. We'll see how that all develops. But I want to get into the particulars of this brace of 2-year-old races. See, I can use the English term. Let's start off with the one on Friday. We're talking about the Al Basti Equiworld Dubai Rockfell Stakes. This is a race that's had Breeders' Cup implications in the past. Winning your action for the Juvenile Fillies turf happening at Newmarket. What does this year's field look like?
Well, it's a big field, but it probably where it has plenty of quantity, I feel like it might lack a little bit of quality this time around. And up at the top of the market, we have this horse Commissioning. He's just had this one start for John and Thady Gosden, a relatively short price at the moment as things stand. And I find it very interesting. I always find this angle interesting when it comes to the 2-year-old races, because as punters, I think we really latch on to potential over proven form. And Olivia Moralda, who's next best in the betting for the Michael O'Callaghan team, she has the real proven form. She's been out plenty. She's had a good few runs. She was second to Meditate when we last saw her. Meditate at the time was unbeaten, has been beaten since, but I don't think that's anything. Her form is nothing to sort of poo-poo, so to speak. And she's really got the form in the book. Yes, she's dropping back in trip, Olivia Moralda, but I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue for her. And meanwhile, you've got Commissioning in here, she's staying at the trip she's run well at so far, Olivia Moralda, and then Commissioning made her debut at the 7 furlongs. Now, this was over on the July course, and it's just interesting. Like, she's from a yard who they know what they have at home. You know, they know very early. They press all the buttons they need to press. And I found the quote from Frankie Dettori after Commissioning won on debut, saying that she'd done it nicely, but she had taken them very much by surprise. He was only told that she was okay this morning and she was green early doors. Now, that doesn't necessarily fill you with confidence that she should be a 7-4 shot on her second chance stepping into a Group 2. I personally don't think. I think people have really latched on to her. But for me, I'd be looking at a horse like Olivia Moralda because she's got that proven form in the book.
It's interesting, and it's that push-pull when you're dealing with these 2-year-olds. In terms of ability, when I hear a quote like that, about the Frankie quote about Commissioning, it does make me think that, hey, when they run that well, when little is expected, when they're not showing that much at home, when they're green in the early part of a race, there is certainly scope for improvement. But right into a Grade 2, Group 2, feels like it could be a case of too much too soon. But I'll tell you what, if she would run well again this time, I would really start to think you might have something special.
Yeah, for sure. And she's bred to be something special as well. You look at her breeding, she's by Kingman and she's out of a Galileo mare. She's bred by the owners. She never went through the sales ring or anything like that. And so she is bred to be good. And, you know, sometimes those horses that they call kind of sleepers at home on the gallops, and then they come out and they save their best for the racecourse. That's often what trainers say they want in a horse. So maybe it's not necessarily the negative I'm looking at, that she was such a surprise on debut. But I think there's too much of a difference in the market prices at the moment between her and Olivia Moralda. I think Olivia Moralda should be closer to her in the betting. I think she's a bit of value.
Makes sense to me. Any others in here that have connections or a pedigree or ownership group that make you think they might be making the sojourn over to the Breeders' Cup like you will be in a few weeks?
Hard to say, really. I think it's interesting. Obviously, you've got Richard Hannon in here. His representative, Rich, has the same profile as the favourite. But this horse, a Cracksman filly, she made her debut back in May and she won. She was quite a short price that day at Newbury. Newbury can be red hot maidens over here, and she won well. She was fancied to do so, but she's been off the track ever since. So something has clearly gone amiss with her. But of course, Richard Hannon already has Trillium penciled in to come over for the Breeders' Cup this year. I think they're very keen to bring her over. She runs on Saturday in Newmarket. It'd be brilliant to see how she gets on. But win, lose or draw, I think those owners of Trillium have very much got the Breeders' Cup in the diary already. So I expect to see Richard Hannon with at least one representation over in America come the first week in November. But I think it might be a step too far with this Rich. But I'm interested to see how she goes. She's also by first season sire Cracksman, and I very much expect his crop. He's not made a bad start, but I expect his crop to get better with age. He only made his debut in October over a mile. So, expect more from Rich, but it's just a question mark off this break and what the setback was.
Sometime when we have more time, we'll dive more into the difference between first-year sires over there than what we see over here, where everything is so geared towards speed and precocity. People get very, very excited, and you really want to see them get off to that fast start. It feels to me like, just logically speaking, you could show a little bit more patience, and it's understandable that certain very, very top sires are just going to take a little bit of time to get going. We'll see how things play out in the Rockfell. Let's pivot to the Juddmonte Royal Lodge Stakes on Saturday, also at Newmarket. Winning, you're in action for the juvenile turf, and a race that's produced many starters and several winners for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And now this, unfortunately, you see, where we have plenty of quantity in the Rockfell, we have very little quantity in this race in the Royal Lodge, but we have a fair bit of quality because we have this Flying Honours who's currently 6-4 on at the top of the market as things stand 2 days before the race. Now, for me, the Godolphin 2-year-olds this year and the O'Brien Coolmore 2-year-olds have been, I feel, above average. There's been some really good performances from the 2-year-olds over here in the UK and across the board as well, all sort of different trips, different sires, but both the sort of superpowers over here seem to have a really good crop of 2-year-olds. And the fascinating angle in this race, it's obviously over the mile, and you've got Flying Honours, as I've said, at the top of the market. Now, he's been an incredibly short price favourite on all 3 of his runs thus far. He was beaten on debut, which was disappointing, but typically they never gave him a hard time. They sort of looked after him. That was on the July course. And now, since then, he's just gone on and improved with every run, the 2 runs since, and he's taken a listed race when we last saw him. That was when Stepped Up to the Mile. And breeding wise, I just I'm relying on him to improve, but just on all known form and his pedigree page, he should improve with a bit of time and age and distance as well. He sticks at the mile for the time being, but I just can't, as the price suggests, I just can't see him being beaten this, unfortunately. You've got that Greenland taking him on for the Coolmore team. And again, an interesting angle here because they have loads of darts they could throw at the board for a race like this. And they've decided to throw in this Greenland, who's got a pretty uninspiring form page thus far. And I wonder if it's a little bit of a citer of things to come for the Coolmore team. You know, they'll be sending plenty of horses over for the bigger races, the bigger 2-year-old races this autumn here in the UK. And this horse is far from one of theirs out the top draw. So it'll be a good gauge for them to see where their set is at home, to see how Greenland gets on here in this, what is a relatively weak looking race behind the favourite.
And it doesn't seem like any of these are necessarily going to be pointed, at least this far out, to the Breeders' Cup specifically. But as we've seen in past years, surprises can happen. You hearing any buzz about any of these potentially coming over? If you had to guess about one that might make the Breeders' Cup, I mean, it feels like the market leader, they're going to have other plans for. But what about any of the others that are lining up?
Yeah, I just can't really see it, to be honest. I think the Charlie and Mark Johnson horse, who's the outsider, that's the 14-1 shot Dubai Mile. I'm not sure he'd be suited to heading over to America. I think he'll need a bit more time anyway, and he's really thrown in the deep end here. The Foxes, I personally don't think would be good enough, and those are not connections who have sent horses over there with regularity anyway. Then obviously we'll see how Greenland gets on. And as for Flying Honours, obviously Charlie Appleby's been having such a good time of it in America with the horses he's been taking over there. We know he's going to have an excellent Breeders' Cup team of horses this year. That is pretty expected. Whether this horse gets on the plane is up for debate at this point. I just wonder if he might be one that they put away. Depending on how, it's all going to be dependent on how he goes on Saturday. But I wonder if he might be one that they do put away for a spring campaign.
A race worth watching, a couple of races worth watching for USA viewers. In any case, potential Breeders' Cup implications, winning your in action from Newmarket this week. Vanessa Ryle, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll be hearing more from you soon.
Thanks very much. Oh, that's
we get a canine cameo at the end. Talk soon. That always amuses me. It was a cute little Jack Russell who came and chatted with us for a minute there afterwards. Of course, we had to leave that in. We love animal interaction.
Had some opinions on the racing.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I was saying, Vanessa, your mom, you got it all wrong. 2 minutes to race number 6 here, Belmont at the Big A. It was great. Thanks again to Vanessa for joining us. She's going to be a big part of stuff that we put together for the Breeders' Cup content team and also for In the Money Media around the time. She knows everybody. Great presenter, good idea of form, gives out plenty of winners. It's going to be a lot of fun. So 2 minutes, race number 6. I thought this favorite was going to be very tough to turn over in this spot, Matt. I mean, obviously it doesn't really help you if you're playing in a contest, but this horse, while not far now is the name of the beast, has not been on the dirt for a long time, but has form from back in the day that just looks better than these and should be able to, I would think, get loose unless Dylan Davis on the 11 Quick Flash really wants to go on a mission. I was going to keep it simple and just make a little win bet on Not Far Now in this spot and look to get a little lunch money. What did you think?
Now, we've talked about this. I'm not the biggest bettor outside of a contest or things like that. So for me, a big bet would be about $100. I bet $100 on the number 9 Battle Station.
Nice.
Can you see it if you look at it? Because to me, you brought up my big unknown, and maybe the money is telling. With the Inside Horse, I have no idea how good this horse is on dirt. This horse was claimed, and the form is you're banking on the horse being able to replicate the mid to high 80 buyers from the grass on the main track. When early on in the career, granted a different horse at that point, that would suggest that's not what the horse is on the main track. So maybe if it's purely a speed play, the horse is going to get out there. Nobody can run with him. I can't argue. I don't think there should be such a wild discrepancy. And I say wild, it's 2.5 points. But, there's a pretty big difference between 6-5 and a couple of 5-2 shots, one of them being effectively an MTO, in a race that's on the dirt, not on the turf.
I see where you're coming from with this. And another thing, to your point, Linda Rice flying at the moment, right? I mean, that barn has been sending out winners. And Battle Station does have dirt races that are not far behind. I guess for me, I couldn't get past the pace thing. And I basically left it there. 5-2 makes sense on Battle Station. I think Quick Flash might be the one who has a finds himself in perhaps the trickiest situation, in that his best races are right on the lead, and I think he's going to have a tough time getting it with Not Far Now down there at the inside, and Manny Franco being very good out of the gate and very good in sprints in general. I guess the best thing for Battle Station would be to see those two hook up. I mean, if Dylan Davis does go on a mission to not let Manny Franco get out of his sights, Battle Station could just pull a perfect trip. Or do you think Kendrick Carmouche, pretty aggressive rider in his own right, might try to put this horse into the race a little bit more? What kind of trip are you looking for from Battle Station?
In a perfect world, the combination of the two, because to your point with Quick Flash, 2 times a winner from 25 starts, 9 runner-up finishes and 4 third-place finishes. Not a nose for the wire, but the only way this one can win, in my opinion, is by going. So if they're in it to win it, I think you need to be aggressive out of there. And then at the same time, you alluded to Carmouche being aboard for Linda. You know, I think it's safe to say Kendrick's best asset is his aggressiveness, that he can get a horse out of there and be forward. If he can be within, let's say, 2 lengths down the backside and into the far turn, hopefully of both of those top two. If he's 2 lengths off of the one horse who's loose by himself, probably going to have a tall order ahead of him. But if he can be sitting just in behind those 2, length and a half, 2 lengths off of it, I don't think they're going to be going crazy fast, even if they do end up hooking up. Just keep it honest enough for this one to have a puncher's chance, because I think his dirt form I just think it's better than what the other horses have right now. And maybe I'm getting suckered into a 7-year-old whose best days are behind him. But you brought up the Linda Rice barn is cooking along right now. And, you know, again, I have enough questions about the inside runner on the main track still.
Did you see anything in the 6 or the 7? I really felt like the 3 we've talked about would be the ones that have it between them. And the more I look, I think I'm feeling kind of I'm gonna play actually real quick here, a quick 1-9.
Yeah, brew pub just on figs, very, very difficult to make any kind of recommendation. And then me and Sap, yeah, you're coming in off of a victory, but again, you look at the form on turf compared to the main track. I mean, it's apples to oranges. The horse is a grass horse, and I get it. They're taking a shot here. Why not run him if he's in good form and you know, you're ready to go? This was the plan today. I have a hard time seeing him win, but these short fields, anything can happen.
One got out of there with alacrity, being quarter horsed right now by Manny Franco. He wants that lead. He ain't taking no for an answer. He established good position, didn't have to work that hard, but it does seem like Quick Flash and Dylan Davis not letting him get out of the sights. And this is more or less the ride you described from Battle Station, or is that a little bit further back than you wanted to see?
I mean, maybe a hair, but I would be splitting hairs at that point. I would prefer Dylan apply a little more pressure right now, because I don't want to let this one get away on the front. But I can't complain about the trip, all things considered. This is kind of, you know, positionally what I had hoped for.
I love what Manny's doing. You saw him there shake his hands for just a second and get that separation, and it does appear that he's won the speed battle with the 11. You got that aim here turning in. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. It's either going to be my 1-9 or a nice winner for you. I think I've made a token bet. I'm rooting for you here, and you're going right by. So that's a good thing. A good pick, and maybe the 11 did just enough. Boy, the one just emptying out there all over the stretch. Brew Pub coming to pick up the pieces. A very nice pick, Matt, and that's not bad. That money will spend very well.
Yeah, and again, it's, you know, easy to sit here and go back and, you know, red board things, but I think that's an important. And again, I'm somebody on days like today, if it were a genuinely wet track, I would probably avoid it at all costs, just because I drown in the slop. But horses that are meant to run on grass, typically there's a reason that's what they want to do. And the same, and vice versa. Horses that are meant to run on dirt, you know, you don't end up moving from the dirt to the turf. Unfortunately, if you have turf horses, you can get moved from the turf to the main track. And horses that aren't meant to run on a certain surface, or just haven't shown that they can do the same things on one versus the other, you know, at a short price, even with the tactical advantage, I would always just tread lightly, especially if we're talking about a short price. If that horse on the inside was going to be somewhere, you know, 3, 4, 5 to 1 in a 5-horse field, I wouldn't talk you off of it. But
no, I get it.
I just 6 to 5 seemed a little aggressive compared to the form that we had already seen from this one on the main, and from what the other horses had produced on the main track in the past.
I think it's a fair point. I mean, just went out like a light in the stretch, and not my best opinion, but good for you for coming up with the winner there. I will say this: I've come to believe that the extra bit of toughness, I'm just going to call it toughness, because, you know, dirt racing by its nature is so much more attritional. If they've got turf blood, especially, I will give them much extra credit that first turf start, because I think sometimes they're just tougher, they're better, they're faster, they get themselves in better position. You know, they need to have some blood though, or some indication for me. I wouldn't bet them blindly. I wouldn't bet one with breeding that suggests they might not be able to stand up on the turf. But I love in these type of races, and I didn't do it here, but, you know, I got suckered into those races from farther back, and the claiming angle and the pace. But you see a lot of times where they're betting, the market is being made off of turf numbers on the dirt, and that'll, you know, generally speaking, wanting to bet against those every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I that's how I sort of see the dirt, turf, dirt conundrum there.
I would be curious to go back and watch the tape again. And to be fair, I hadn't watched much tape on the inside horse in the past, but with the way that Manny rode compared to the way Kendrick rode Battle Station, again, for the majority of his career, did his damage on turf, but he had proven himself on the main track. But you saw Carmouche really start, and granted, he had to go and run down a horse, but he started getting after him early. Not far now, as a turf horse, we're so used to seeing wait, and then cut him loose and have that spurt home. Well, that spurt on dirt is very uncommon. I talk about turn of foot being a bit of a misused phrase. I think turn of foot is good on turf because that's what we're looking at. They genuinely quicken. On dirt, you're progressively getting slower as the race goes on. So while it looks like they're accelerating, they're just slowing down slower than everyone else. And I think that we kind of throw it around. I'm guilty of it as much as anyone. He's shown a good turn of foot. Well, is it really a turn of foot on dirt if he's slowing down or she's slowing down? I think of a turn of foot as, a Lady Eli or an Uni or somebody like that when they says go time, they actually run faster.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. I completely agree. It's not, I love the term on turf and I think it means something, quicken, whatever you want to call it. But on dirt, it's often an optical illusion. I did like that ride. I just don't think the horse saw it out. Yeah. I praised it and I'm not going to go back on that. And when a horse goes away so tamely, this is a horse that has multiple wins at 7 furlongs too. That's not far now. I love the ride. I love the strategy. I think that's exactly right. It's just not always going to work out. And, we'll go back when this racing day is over. We'll go back and we'll really evaluate. It did also look like a track that's not just how poorly and that horse ran and how quickly the horse gave up the fight in the lane, as did the other speed. Just seems like maybe is it a drying out, tiring kind of track that we're going to want to, be a little forgiving of speed types the next day. I'm not willing to say that now, but I have that idea in the back of my head, and it's something I'm going to test for when we have charts and some of these horses start running back, especially because that's really the best way you can get an opinion on how a track was playing is put your theory to the test and then see how they do next time and be willing to be nimble even then. You might think it's a speed track, but the horses that should have been running worse or better based on it aren't doing what you expected. After 3 of them or 4 of them run back, you got to handicap the races and make sure there aren't other things going on. But you got to be willing to be flexible with these opinions and try to separate the signal from the noise, as a man once said.
Yeah, that's the fun of this. We can talk about go through the race and assess certain things here, this, that, and the other. To your point, when you have other data points to go back then and say, okay, well, either this idea was correct or, it worked out for one reason or another, but not for the reason I thought it did that day of. That's when you can really go through and actually make some hay and come to some good conclusions that you can use to your advantage going forward.
Another fun thing about these shows is it is a good opportunity. We're talking about our question and answer show for Breeders' Cup. We can start that now if folks have ideas and you want to throw some ideas in the comments over there. Happy to ask and answer some of those. And the only other thing on my list I definitely wanted to get to today, Matt, was an opportunity to look back at last weekend and ask you how impressed you were. We had a fun conversation about the speed figure in the Woodbine Mile right after the race. You and I speculating. We knew it was going to be big, speculating how big it might be. I, for one, was a little bit surprised at how big it came back. 112 on the buyer scale. Just looking at it and going through the past numbers of what horses usually run, I think I'm going to personally treat it more like it was a 108, 109 than a 112. But effectively, I'm not sure that makes any difference in the world other than make me a little bit feared that this horse could be Modern Games overbet next time out in the Breeders' Cup Mile. But he's not going to be overbet enough to make me want to oppose him, if that makes any sense. And he's a 3-year-old, and he may well be able to improve next time. So what did you think of Modern Games in general? What did you think of the figure that he earned?
Well, I thought it was a spectacular performance. He did everything that you would hope we would see. We talked about it on Happy Hour last week that I was hopeful that the big horse would show through. And I ultimately didn't pick him purely based on price. I said, he's probably going to win the race, but I can't justify betting him at 3-5. I was going to have a hard time betting him at 6-5, and he went off at half that. So, I think he was wildly overbet, but based on the way he ran, he probably wasn't wildly overbet. I mean, he was appropriately bet because he ran a hole in the wind. I heard a little piece that our friend Nick Luck did with Charlie Appleby earlier today, and Appleby said just he hasn't had many horses that have improved as quickly as this one has over the past few months. And he goes, he's an exciting prospect. He goes, we were very confident going to Canada, and it would make all the sense in the world for a mile sort of winner or a big time prospect. And Nick did ask the question about the QE2, and Appleby didn't totally shoot that down, which I thought was interesting. But bigger picture, we talked about the Fig. I think you and I are kind of in lockstep there. I was thinking, 107, 108. Timeform US had it about a 127, which would sort of fall in line with what you and I are thinking. But at that point, truth be told, whether it's a 107 or a 112 or a 115, I mean, I just don't. Who else is capable of running anything close to that? If he shows up and does that the first Saturday in November, I think they're all running for second.
Yeah, we'll see what comes over from Europe, and we'll see what type of figures they're going to be running. We're going to have a lot of information about the Euro shippers coming over. There'll be some good stuff that's absolutely free on inthemoneypodcast.com. And then people who subscribe to our Plus service, inthemoneypodcast.com/plus, going to be a whole other array of information from experts. But yeah, we'll see. I'm very curious to try to get a line on the kind of figures that the presumptive Japanese invaders Songline runs.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine they're quite that fast. Or Homeless Song's another one who's been rumored to come over. And then, of course, Ground could come into this. I would imagine that might be the deciding factor for Appleby with Champions Day and Modern Games. If it is unexpectedly firm, I would think maybe they'd take a shot. But I think if it's gooey, and it's been raining over there, if it's wet ground, if it's soft ground, I think they'll wait and they'll take their chances and hope that it doesn't come up too soft at Keeneland. But even so, the soft that we'll run on here, the good or whatever we're going to end up calling it at Keeneland in the fall, probably not nearly as soft as what they're likely to see on Champions Day. Was that on the Nick Luck Daily podcast by chance that you heard that interview?
No, it was on. I don't want to say the wrong group over in England or over in the UK.
It was part of his broadcast partners.
Yes, yeah.
Got it.
And to that point, Appleby said, he goes, based on history, our conditions over here probably won't be to suit. But if for whatever reason it's the ground is fast, we'll consider it. I did mention that in the on the broadcast on Saturday afterward. I guess we were waxing poetic about how impressive he was. I threw the same thing out that you just brought up. I mean, I guess to me, the one race where he really didn't kind of show through, aside from the French Derby, was the race where he caught a bit of testing ground. And if for whatever reason, it's on the softer side at Keeneland in November, which wouldn't be totally out of the question given the time of year and in Kentucky with the weather that they could have. Maybe that's a little cause for pause before you just completely say all in, done. But man, I think it's I think it's going to be a tall order to beat him.
I think you're absolutely right. We have some Grade 1 action this weekend that we should probably take a minute to talk about. Have you had a chance to look at the Parks Grade 1 stuff? Pretty compelling races, both of these, starting with the Cotillion. I'm not sure we're going to be looking at any Breeders' Cup implications in here, but you never know with a big performance. And certainly the boys' race, the trainer of one of them is talking a little bit like Breeders' Cup could be in the cards. But let's start with the Cotillion. Matt, who do you like in here?
I'll give you two things. The Cotillion, I think it's a fascinating race. For anyone, have you gone through the race, done a deep dive?
Yeah, pretty much.
What do you think of Green Up?
Looking at some figure sources, that was a pretty quick race the last day. And ultimately, that's not where I landed, but this is a horse I'd want on if I'm taking a big plunge. And I haven't done the deep dive on all of these stakes yet. We are going to be doing a plus show tomorrow with me and our Parks guy, Andrew. We're going to be going through them. I would, in the right exotics combination, this is a horse I would want to have as a backup, just based on that figure the last day. What did you think?
I thought she was really good. I thought it was an impressive race. But my big thing was I just can't imagine her going off at 6-1. I think people are going to see the 100 buyer, see Irad, see Todd, see the win over the track, X, Y, and Z, and all of those victories that she's got. I mean, really, with the exception of the debut, she's never really been tested. I think she probably goes off close to half that in that sort of 7-2 range, which I think could help some of these other horses. I don't love her, but I went with Shahama. I thought her Monmouth Oaks, I don't know what she beat in that spot, but I thought that was the best she's looked since she came over here. She's more or less paired up by her tops, 93 and 92. Let's say she can get up into a mid to high 90. I think that at least gives her a puncher's chance. I guess there is a chance that she gets outrun early on, and maybe that's not an ideal running style for her. But to be fair, she rallied, and granted it was against inferior over in the Middle East, but she rallied from off the pace over there just fine. I figured she would be a price in a race that I thought was pretty competitive, so I went with Shahama in here. But my fun little nugget, my thought anyway. Tell me I'm crazy. I don't think Secret Oath can win the distaff, whether she wins this race or not. I think they should turn her back to the filly and mare sprint, because who are you terrified of in that race? No, and the beautiful thing about Secret Oath to me is every race she comes with that middle move, that move rounding the turn, and in a sprint, that's where you make hay. And on the turn back, to me, if I was involved with her, I would say forget the distaff. We're going to be fifth choice in there at best. Run her in the filly and mare sprint, because I think she could win.
I love that idea. Actually, I hadn't thought of it, but the way she runs around the turn, that's super duper interesting. And I'm not wild about her in here. I think it's a tough. I mean, we'll see, but I just feel like we may have seen the best of her routing in a race where there's a lot of other interesting possibilities. I went with Adair Manor, who I just thought, looking at this work tab, I'd be curious to see a proper clocker report and see if it backs this up. But she ran some fast races this spring. Versatile, I think, in terms of running style. I'd like to see her stalking and pouncing. I thought the Black-Eyed Susan was better than it looked, wide on a day when ground loss mattered. And just, again, looking at the work tab, appears to have worked very well. And then you do the old figure improvement for age trick, and I think she can get up there and run what a lot of these others are. I'm with you also on the more I look at Green Up, I think the more I like, in that I think she's also going to be able to get an absolutely perfect trip. Stalking and pouncing. If Adair Manor goes forward, ends up hooking a runner like Society. I want some Green Up on the tickets for sure in a backup role, but I'm going to definitely be taking a bit of a shot with Adair Manor here as well. Let's move on, because we only have a few minutes left, Matt. Pennsylvania Derby. This one's a bit of a scramble. Very curious to know who you landed on.
It's such a good race. It really is. I feel like you can make a proper case for 6 horses in here. I think Tabe is going to get the trip that he wants. I don't think he necessarily has to have the lead. I think Timeform US has him on the front. But I think there are a couple other horses in here that absolutely have to go. The big thing for Taba at this point, he's going to be in the clear. It seems highly unlikely there's anyone in front of him with kickback, and he's going to have to take any kind of kickback, which I think is what kind of was to his undoing down at Monmouth. He kind of showed a little bit of greenness. It's part of the reason I don't think he ran well in the Derby. The other part about that Monmouth race, he had a big gap in the workout tab prior to the race, just a few weeks out. So he ended up missing about 10, 14 days. He only went into the Haskell with 2 workouts. For him to run as well as he did that day, I think speaks volumes about the talent. I think he probably works out the best trip in here. I think he's the most likely winner. I love Cyberknife. He's a big fan of his. I think Zandon can run better. The horse I'm debating if I'm bold enough to pick him on top. I think Skippy Longstocking's in with a chance. And he, I've talked about that Belmont. I think it's 10 points too low on the buyer scale. You give him 10 points, that puts him to a 101. I thought his West Virginia Derby was really good. I know it was over a wet track, but a 102 buyer, a 130 Timeform US rating. I think he's coming into it in the right direction. Yeah, he gets the acid test, but he's going to be, I would assume, every bit of that 10-1. So, my head says Taba, but from a gambling standpoint, I think Skippy Longstocking is kind of compelling.
It's an interesting case you make on him. I wasn't taking the slop West Virginia Derby that literally, but you make a good case about if you raise that Belmont up mentally, and I do think that was a very good race. You can start to really make a case that it wasn't just the slop and the trip that moved that moved up that horse. But for me, I got to go with Cyberknife in this spot. I was very, very impressed with this horse, not just in the Haskell, but even, I thought this horse ran really well last time, showing so much more early pace and still running a new top. That's hard to do. And I don't think he runs his best on the lead. I think he can be reserved this time, come from off the pace. Maybe Tabe is part of that pace. We, the people, will certainly be part of that pace. There's the stretch out horse, the 3-runner in here should be helping make pace as well. I think Cyberknife can get a perfect trip from an attacking spot. I like the way Brad Cox talks about this horse. Had him on the show earlier in the week, and when I asked him about the Breeders' Cup, the first horse he mentioned was this horse, which I thought, is a very soft factor, but I thought it was interesting. And I'm going to key a lot of my stuff around him, but I'm not saying it's as simple as him either. Table will have to be backed up with. And I'm going to take another look at Skippy Longstocking on your say-so as well, Matt. Any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I guess my closing thought will be a question. What do you do with Zandon? And I'll leave it at that.
Well, this would be the one for me. You talked about the interesting Secret Oath cutback idea. I think that's right for Zandon. Maybe I'm wrong. Chad Brown certainly knows more than me, and it's not like he's just putting him back in here quick by his own standards to try to get the grade 1 routing. He's already got one. So it's not about that. I think he really thinks he fits. Usually it's a question of in Chad Brown we trust, but I might let Zandon make the market for me in here and give me a chance to take a shot with that Cyberknife A, Taba B to C type backup strategy. I don't think I'd feel right betting too much in the race using all 3 of those. So I'm mildly against it. It sounds like you sound like you're a bit more positive than me, but not enthusiastic either.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say, I've kind of made my opinion of him. I agree with you. I think he's better shorter. In my head, down the road, Cigar Mile just feels like a good spot for him.
Yeah, that would make a ton of sense. It must be doing well for Chad Brown to be putting him in here, and we'll see if we hear any trainer quotes or get any other intel on that. Fun time of year. It's some of the other tracks get to take center stage. Parks have their weekend, this weekend, possible Breeders' Cup implications. Obviously, last weekend, the Win and You're In stuff up in Toronto. Week before that, Kentucky Downs. Pretty soon, though, we're going to get into these final round of preps. Lots of Santa Anita, lots of Keeneland, and lots more. Belmont at Aqueduct. We're going to be covering it here on Horseplayers Happy Hour. We're going to be covering it across the In the Money Media Network as well, and on the Matt Bernier Show. You're back in regular rhythm for the next few weeks over there?
Yes, we should be good to go. I don't see any kind of stops coming right through the Breeders' Cup.
Beautiful. This is a huge time of year for us. We hope that we've just been spammed in the chat.
The bots got us.
Greg, will you take care of that, please? It's going to be fun, and we're going to be all over it here and elsewhere. All right, good stuff. We'll thank you one more time, Matt Bernier. We'll thank Vanessa Ryle. We'll thank producer Craig for pushing all the right buttons. Our friends at Breeders' Cup, especially Haley. Hey, that was fun seeing her. We didn't talk about the other grade 1s up there or any of the action at Churchill last weekend, but it was fun seeing her in the Churchill Downs winner circle with her dad's horse. And Justin over there has been such a pleasure to work with as well. This show's been a co-production of the Breeders' Cup and In the Money Media. On our side, our business managers, Drew Coatney, our chief creative officers, Jonathan Ginchin. I'm Peter Thomas for Natal. May you win all your photos.